Hello, everyone. Welcome to KTAL News Now. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin, and today I'm joined by a very special guest from the new animated film from Angel Studios, David, and it tells the story of David in the Bible and his adventures throughout his life, including the one with Goliath. And here is the voice of Samuel from the film, Brian Stivale. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure to join you today.
So, could you tell us a little bit about you and like how you ended up finding this role?
I'm a professional actor since I was 16 years old. I've had a very interesting, colorful, and adventurous life. But part of that has entailed me becoming a goodwill ambassador to the state of Israel, also to teaching Hebrew roots and keeping the feasts, and having that as a part of my walk as a pastor of a church. So, in the midst of being a voice actor in the entertainment industry and all over the world, I get to do that too. So, I teach in the Holy Land and on the footsteps of Paul as well. And this role came up in the midst of me leaving one of those tours, and it was a perfect fit. So it was really divine timing, everything playing together in such a way that I couldn't explain other than to call it divine timing. That led me to this role, to Sunrise Animation, and to this amazing, incredible work of art that I'm so proud to be a part of.
And you mentioned, your career's obviously spanned with several different projects in animation, video games, narration. Like, what about the role in David with Samuel made it distinct from everything you've done previously?
Oh, Anthony, if I could just be straightforward, and I say this with no guile, this is the greatest part I've ever gotten to play. It's the truest blessing of my life to be able to play this role. First of all, I don't know if it's legal to do this, but he's my favorite prophet in the Old Testament. He's the man. He's like hardcore. If you really read First and Second Samuel and learn about him, he's incredible. Just his entire life story. So that, but also seeing from the very get go, if you will, of the audition process, the inception art, the conception, or rather the proof of concept for the project, it was exquisite, and I knew this was something special. Particularly because their synopsis for the byline on the audition to describe it was Tangled meets the Prince of Egypt, and I loved the Prince of Egypt. I don't know about you, but it's been 22 years since the Prince of Egypt, and that type of Old Testament soul food animation that really transports people, and I believe David has accomplished that. So when I got on board with this, I recognized very early on, this is special, this is unique, this is something I'm going to have to grapple hold of for as long as I can, and pray that there's more to this world in the future, because it's exquisite, it's unique, and it's definitively, of all the roles I've played, I've been Batman, I've been Venom from Marvel, I've done tons of narration, tons of commercials, tons of the cartoons. I'm still blessed and privileged to do lots and lots of video games, but this one's unique. It was special.
Yeah, I personally love The Prince of Egypt. I think it has definitely stood the test of time in terms of the quality of
Absolutely.
absolutely everything. It was such a great film. But for your character in Samuel, I know you said he was your favorite prophet, but when it came to approaching that role and like I guess doing him right and in his portrayal, I guess what went into that process?
It was a lot of stuff that was out of my control that was formative in my core belief system and who I am as a person that made that up. It was already informed. I believe as an actor that the writing really gives you everything you need, but you also need to approach historical and sacred objects and people like this because it's a history. It's not a story. These are real people. As elevated as this all is, they have actual tangible history you can access, and that's amazing because that's a starting point. But the writing informs that, where that sits, because obviously, this is not like the House of David project for Amazon, where it's going for heightened realism, where it's real but it's still heightened. This is a musical animated adventure, so it allows us the deference to do a lot more. The best way I could describe it is that it's like if you had read your child First and Second Samuel before they fell asleep. This is their dream, their fever dream, if you will, of remembering what you just taught them. And I think that kind of encapsulates it, because kids get the core of what we're trying to get across in that. But there's something so incredible about approaching it when there's history, there's the Bible, but then there's also the great writing from Brent Dawes and great direction from him as well about how to approach this character in this incarnation, because there's been many incarnations of Samuel. Leonard Nimoy's played him. My competition from the holiday box office, Blue Space Monkey #2 played him. I can't remember his name right now. Forgive me. My goodness. But there's so many people that have played him, and there's so many incarnations of him. But this one was unique.
And you mentioned, you've played various characters in the Marvel and DC universes, as well as a bunch of different video games. When it comes to stepping into this role with Samuel, it's obviously a biblical and very grounded world that it is taking place in.
Mhm.
I guess, how does that compare to the overarching, larger than life fictional universes when it, like in Marvel and DC and everything?
Well, everything's got this level of honesty that it needs to be approached with, no matter how science fiction or fantasy oriented is. I do a cartoon for Butch Hartman, also for Angel Studios, called The Garden, where I am the voice of God and many other characters. And that's peaked, like they're talking animals in the Garden of Eden, and they drive robot cars and stuff. It's kind of like a way over the top, but there's still got to be this level of honesty. The best definition for acting that I could give you is what I've operated off of since I was a kid, and that's living truthfully in an imaginary circumstance. So there's always got to be that level of honesty. Like, if this was really happening to me, how do I approach this? Where am I coming from? Because acting is not reacting. That's bad acting. Acting is living honestly, truthfully in an imaginary, however heightened circumstance.
And you previously said that you have lived in Jerusalem. You teach Hebrew
Yeah,
roots, the biblical archaeology of everything,
yeah.
and I guess that personal connection that is able to be applied to this story. Do you feel like that helped you in your role and your preparation?
Definitively, because I was already living there. I remember when I was in my youth, I did a production of Fiddler on the Roof, which takes place in the Russian shtetls of the turn of the century in the 1900s. And the culture of Judaism there is so self-specific, because it's what modern day Litvak Judaism and a lot of the Ashkenazi Judaism comes from culturally. And we were given class for a week before we ever stepped foot on stage to cold read anything or to block any of the scenes, because the amount of foreknowledge that went into it was, you needed an education in order to honor it properly. It's sacred. And when you have that element in any kind of a production, you need to approach it with the utmost respect. So with this specifically, especially if you're a believer, which I am, that was already inherently in me. Approaching it was going to happen with a level of respect and awe and divine reverence that I recognized was in the source material. But then also, just approaching it from where it was in the telling of the story, facilitating the story, because what Phil and Brent and the team at Sunrise wanted to accomplish with this incarnation of David was to inspire and entertain and reach kids and adults where they're at right now in life, and let them know that you can be like David. You can have a heart after God like David, and you can follow the light like David. So it was kind of all really in there. It was easy to approach this role from that perspective. Whereas when I was younger and doing Fiddler on the Roof, it was like I needed to be educated. Now it's in me, so that part was easy. It's more the after effects that are great, because I see all that they did in the film from the expert perspective of biblical archaeology. Wow, I'm a professional speaker. They all they did with the research they did in the Holy Land, they stayed true to this. This honestly, from a production perspective, was a love letter to the Holy Land and to the land and the people, the history. There's so many little Easter eggs throughout this movie. I encourage you to watch it multiple times, particularly if you're a fan of history, because there's little Easter eggs in the design elements, the way that fabric is stitched, the rings themselves are actually elementally correct. Everything about the geography is correct. I've had Israelis say, "I know where that is," and it's a cartoon. So keep that in mind. There was a level of authenticity that it really gave itself already. So
Awesome. And when it comes to the themes of the film, David explores several different ones, including, calling, courage, spiritual obedience. I guess which aspect of your character's relationship with David was the most compelling for you?
The most compelling aspect of it was the covering aspect, because that's where the anointing comes into it. The anointing itself, the mashuch, that's where the word Mashiach, the source word of Messiah, comes from. It literally means the oil, the covering, but it's also the glue, and it holds everything together. And without that covering, the rest of David's story, his adventure, his walk, was not going to be covered by God. What happened for Saul that broke the covenant with God, that broke the covering with God, was his pride, his hubris, his love of the crown, as Samuel says in the film and in the scripture. Uh, the difference between him and David is that David's heart was so pure that that covering was just a protective sealant over it, if you would, no matter what he'd go through. And we all know David was a very human figure. Actually, it's funny, we put him on this pedestal because of the baseline that he has a heart after God and he was God's chosen. But he's also a reminder to us that, hey, you may be what you consider a human inequity, of failure, whatever you want to call yourself, put bad words on yourself. Don't do that. But if you consider yourself that, consider David and how much God loved him and favored him. So seeing that play out is really very, very cool in this story too, as an inspiration to everyone.
And we've talked about your previous career. You have so many credits under your belt across all different forms of media. But is there anything in this particular movie that required you to flex, your voice acting muscles or rediscover any ones that you potentially had?
Yeah, I sang in Hebrew publicly for the first time outside of ministry, because when you sing at Shabbat or at the Hebrew feasts, it's just part of the deal, and I'm not a cantor per se. I did start my career doing Broadway musicals. That's how I met my wife. So I'm a singer also, but I got to sing. But it was funny. Instead of being able to spread my beautiful wings and be the baritone that I am, and really wail, if you will, or even do rock and roll, which is another one of my wheelhouses, I had to sound like an 800-year-old prophet that ate all the other prophets before him. Every time I sang beautifully, they said, "Stop it. Remember how old you are. Remember the sacredness of this moment. It's not about how pretty you sound. It's a prayer. Make it prayerful." And so that was a challenge, singing in Hebrew, and then also not bad singing, but being honest in the moment, physically and spiritually. That was a real challenge. I wouldn't say that was a flex. That was definitely a challenge, but I've been told by my directors that I overcame the challenge. So.
And is there anything that you hope audiences, especially people who are discovering David's story for the first time, is there anything that you hope they take away from your portrayal in this?
Well, you said the word audience, and I think about how we had such a great audience in the box office, and we continue to do that as the season, ends our exodus out of the box office. Where I really believe it was meant to be seen on the big screen, but as it goes to streaming, we're going to open up to an entirely new world. And as the international releases happen, I pray that kids all over the world, kids and adults, no matter how old you are as a kid, whether you're 8 or 80, I pray that people are inspired and entertained, and much like our producer, Phil Cunningham's story, when he was a kid and meek and reclusive, his mother came into his room and said, "Why aren't you more like David? You need to be more like David. By your age, he was out there, he's slaying lions and bears, and he fought Goliath. Go have some adventures. Live an adventurous life." We're kept on the internet. We're kept in vacuums so often we forget there's outdoors, there's life, there's an adventure to be had, and that's inspiring, and that's also entertaining. So I encourage people to see the movie, learn the best motives in it, and also, at the end of the day, David says something really beautiful in it, and it's that he'd rather take his chances following the light than to live in the dark, and I think that's a choice everybody needs to make nowadays.
Yeah, I mean that is really beautiful. I'm very very excited. I have not gotten to see it yet, unfortunately, but I'm very very excited to see it.
Well,
It
please do watch it with the entire family. That's the other thing, is you could literally watch this with anybody in your entire family, no matter where they sit, no matter how old they are. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture for everybody to enjoy and be inspired by.
and is there anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to touch a little bit more on?
Well, not just that, it's streaming, yeah, on the Angel platform, and you can purchase it right away. I think we're number 4 or number 3 on Amazon in their movies in theaters, coming out of theaters, purchase level. So it's got a new popularity. Get a hold of it, share it, gift it. There's more to come. I really believe that there's more to come from Sunrise Animation. There's definitely great pictures for Angel, and also go see Solo Mio in theaters this weekend with Kevin James and Jonathan Rumi, and what a great cast! Incredible comedy. It'll just fill your heart, and it's perfect timing for Valentine's Day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for being here. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule
My
to
pleasure,
be
Anthony.
here.
It was a good time. Thank you.
And if you haven't yet, be sure to visit ktalnews.com, which is where you can get all of your local, breaking, and trending news stories. But for now, I'm Anthony Mocklin. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.